Let's make a prop split soul katana from Jujutsu Kaisen.
Right away, I began by taping together some pieces of paper long enough to draw out a template. I'm just eyeballing here, and also using my hands as reference. Once I had a rough sketch, I drew a bold outline, and cut it out with my box cutter. I then traced out the shape onto 10mm high-density EVA foam. When working with dark foams, I'll sometimes use a metal mechanical pencil to engrave my patterns. I once again cut the shape out with my box cutter. As with any prop, you'll need some structure, and for swords, I like to use these fiberglass rods. They're thin, cheap, and strong. The sword is basically a foam sandwich with the rod resting in the middle. To create the wide bevel, I separated half of the blade into two pieces, one side being the spine, the other being the edge. I ended up using a thinner EVA foam for the edge piece, but the idea was to glue the thinner piece at an angle in order to create the illusion of a wide bevel. Here you can see the results of that angle. I roughly mark out the rod placement and then cut out a channel for it to rest in. This way, the two halves of the blade will glue together without the fiberglass rod bulging out. You can see a gap near the end here, and I just used some foam clay to clean it up a bit. Okay, at this point I realized the blade was a bit too wide for my liking, but that's the beauty of working with your hands. Using a straight edge and my blades, I trimmed off some of the blade by the spine. I had to retouch the edges, but now I was way happier with what I've made so far. Making the base handle is pretty similar to the process of making the blade. I traced out my shape onto some high-density EVA foam and cut it out. From here, it was a matter of carving away at the edges in order to make a more rounded organic handle. It's important to note that this handle shape doesn't need to be perfect. The handle has a more organic shape to it, and it's going to be wrapped in the later stages anyway. I add another layer of foam to complete the foam sandwich, and I continue and shape the bevel with my knife. Remember, your blades do the work, your hands are just a guide, so please be safe and use sharp blades. I use a rotary tool with a sanding drum in order to smooth out the handle shape. I then apply some heat with the heat gun. The pommel was really fun to make, and I basically carved it using another piece of foam and a rotary tool. To me, this is what art is. It's not a science. I don't have a finely calculated plan or a 3D model to work with. I simply work through it until I get what I want. I guess my general plan here is to make a C shape and then add the details from there. I wanted this to be as simple as possible, so I opted to also carve the teeth rather than sculpt them individually. Once I was satisfied, I glued it to the bottom of the handle. The split soul katana has this intricate pattern on the blade, and I honestly don't know what they are, so I just did my best. I drew out a rough guide using a silver marker, and proceeded to just carve out with my sanding drum using light and heavy pressure to create more dimension. We're almost done here, and now it's time to wrap the handle. Similarly to the Nanami cleaver I made, I cut out strips of 2mm EVA foam. Think of this like wrapping with leather, or maybe wrapping a tennis racket with overgrip if you play tennis. I slowly wrap the foam around the handle, keeping it gently taut and adding super glue to keep it secured. And now it's time to paint. If you've seen any of my videos already, you know the drill. Basically, I'll spray on thin layers of Plastidip. 3 layers should be enough here. So here's a fun trick you can do if you ever plan on creating your own swords. Try using 2 different shades of color. Here I use a bright silver for the edge, and a darker gray for the spine. Having this tonal contrast along with the beveled edge will really make your props pop. I also add a dark acrylic wash to darken the markings. For the handle, I also add in some light brown to give the handle more of a 3D effect. For the pommel, I just used a smaller paintbrush and started brushing his teeth. Making props is fun and all, but adding paint really brings out the details, and it's a very satisfying process to experience. I typically reserve clear coats for the final steps, but in this case, it will be second to last. Once dry, I add on the fur trim. I got this fake fur from an art store, and I simply use hot glue to attach it on. For final touches, I use my scissors to lightly trim it out. I'm just pretending like I'm cutting my own hair, and I keep trimming until I get the shape that I want.
Oh, and that's how I made the split skull katana from Jujutsu Kaisen. I hope you learned something, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one. I'm sure a lot of people are on the alien craze. This kind of looks like his tongue, you know?